Hello everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of my percussion tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about EQ and bus chain processing. My name is Cody Canyon of Canyon Music Production House here in Las Vegas, and welcome back. Let's jump right in. So I've routed all of my percussion tracks to a bus, labeled it percussion, and I have now my chain, and we're going to go through this chain one by one. So we're going to start off with the EQ. And this EQ, yeah, it looks pretty intense, but honestly, I think every cut here was necessary. There's a lot of drums here, and things kind of build up. And I will go into some of the individual EQs that I did as well on top of this bus EQ. But let's kind of take a listen as a before and after. So here's without the EQ. So as you can hear, this EQ kind of brought it to life, which is kind of funny because all I did was cut. But the mud that builds up in all of these drums definitely sucks out a lot of the energy. So taking out mud in particular places and some harshness in other places, and then making sure you do your auto gain, really clears up a lot of the sound, and so it can cut through a little bit easier without having all of that heaviness to it. So I started off cutting at 41 hertz, and then I did a slight cut with some dynamic compression here at 60. Let's take a listen. And I just felt like that was getting a little bit too powerful there. And then I have this 130 hertz cut. And I just do that to kind of separate the sub-frequencies from the low mids. I didn't like that frequency building up there. It just kind of makes it a little bit muddy as well. And then I have this cut at 200 hertz. That's a very common issue with a lot of different sounds in mixes. The 200 area, it's just muddy, just kind of makes things gross. So I take that out because that really builds up in all of these drum samples. And then I do one around the 400 area to get rid of some of that boxiness. And then I have this one at 1337 with some dynamic compression. And I did this one because the room ambience was kind of getting a little bit too strong for my ear, so I just wanted to tame that a bit. The next EQ I have is around 3500 hertz, and that's what this one is. And this one was just to kind of tame in some of that harshness. And then I have one at 7300 hertz. And, in that area, I was feeling like that's where kind of the high frequencies were kind of getting a little bit too stingy and harsh. So I wanted to tame that a bit as well. And then I have this... and then I have this one here at right around 11,600 hertz. And this one was just to kind of tame some of the high end. I didn't need it to be so bright. Some of the individual EQs I have are such as like these epic hits. I just kind of tame in the low end down to 50 to get rid of that rumble, and then a little bit of a cut at 63 just to kind of tame that in a bit. I did do a similar EQ on the right channel, just with a few different things to create a better stereo image effect. So I boosted some of the high end, ducked out some of the low mids. Yeah, and I do that just so each sound is just slightly different, and it widens the sound just that much more. On these spliced hits, these impacts, I just took out up to 100, and that's because these don't need to be interfering with all of this lower bass and sub-bass frequencies. I really just wanted them to be on the high end, so I cut those to there. And these cinematic percussion low hits, I took out some of the low, mid, and mid-range because the room was getting a little bit big. So let's actually take a listen to what I did here. So this brought in the clarity, in my opinion, to the sound. The room was getting a little bit intense for my taste, so I just wanted to kind of keep the core of the low and the high, and take out some of that mid-range, that room ambience that was natural in that sample. I did a little bit of EQ on the toms, and this is what this sounds like here without the EQ. So I wanted that extra definition and clarity, so I took out some of the low mids and mid-range frequency to kind of, again, tame in that room sound, and then I added some 2K and some 10K to add some clarity to those hits. All right, next I did a little bit of EQ on these piccolo snares. I just wanted a little bit more definition and took out some of that mid-range as well. So here's without the EQ. Wonderful difference. It just brought out the clarity, took out some of that mid-range again. You know, in an orchestral setting, it's very important to kind of sculpt out some of that mid-range in the drums, because if you're going to be using horns and strings and all that, it's going to start interfering. And then I did a little bit of EQ on this first damage hit here, and I just did a sweep up to 554. There was just some rumble and some frequencies that this instrument wasn't serving. Yeah, see, I didn't really need that down there, so I cut that out. And I did some EQ on this one as well. Same thing, took out some of the bottom end of that. You know, the purpose for that was just to kind of accentuate the high percussion. I did some EQ on this one as well. Just clarifies the thing, you know? So because you have so much percussion layering on top of each other, it's important to kind of sculpt what element is contributing to what frequency range. You know, what is the purpose of this percussion? And you just kind of sculpt it with EQ to kind of fit it into its place. And then I did some EQ on this JXL percussion here. And just to clean it up a bit again, 55 and then a 120 cut. Nothing dramatic, but just cleaning up the sound a bit. And I did a little bit of EQ on this one as well. No actual cut, just dynamic compression here. Just tightens up the sound a bit. And then I just put a little bit of reverb on my cymbals, and that's it. So that's all for the EQ. All right, so the next thing in my percussion bus chain is adding some saturation. And that's I use the saturate and color preset. I think it just does a wonderful job. I don't really adjust any of the settings for this preset. It does exactly what I want it to. So let's take a listen with and without it. So I'll start without it. It just brings everything to life. And then the next thing I have is this SSL compressor. It's a bus compressor. And I use the West drum bus preset, and then I just adjust the threshold to what I need. And so it's just doing a little bit of compression just to kind of glue things together. Let's take a listen and see what the needle's doing here. I really like this solid state SSL compressor. It really glues the sound together. It's not too aggressive, and it really kind of picks up that low end, tightens it up, and tames the highs. So just a more contained sound. And then I have this FabFilter multiband compressor doing a little bit of work and doing some EQ sculpting. And here is without. So as you can hear, the mid-range is a little bit more prominent. I took out, I'm compressing a little bit of the low frequencies here. Took about 3 dB out of these high mids, and then the same thing around the high frequencies. And then next on the chain is this bass room plugin. So I'm just sculpting the low end even more, just to really clean it up and get it to exactly where I want it to. So let's take a listen without it first. So again, it just really tightens things up even more. And then the last thing I have is the Oxford Inflator. And this is just some harmonic saturation as well, just to kind of push it even more alive. So let's take a listen with and without. So yeah, again, it's just bringing more and more life to it. It's just little things throughout the chain that just bring everything to life. So that is my chain for my percussion bus. I don't have any reverb on any of these tracks other than the cymbals, like I mentioned earlier. The natural ambience, the room ambience of all of these samples, they're very good, and I really like the space that they're in. So I didn't really need to enhance or grow that space any further, and especially because there's so many layers, it would just become washy, and I'm trying to keep the definition of these drums intact. So yeah, I didn't really feel a need for reverb. Now what I want to do is a before and after, so I'm going to take all these plugins off, and we're going to listen to the track before these plugins, and then what it's going to sound like with the chain intact. So here we go. All right, let's turn on the processing and hear the difference. Okay, so thank you for joining me today on this percussion mixing tutorial. I hope you got some value out of it and learned a little bit more about how you can use layering, panning, and EQ to sculpt the sound that you want, making sure that you find the right sounds to layer in because that's part of the mixing process, using the right combinations of mic positions if you have samples that use mic positions, and then bussing them and processing them to further sculpt the sound at a global level. On my next tutorial, I'm going to be kind of bringing everything together, so the strings, the brass, and the percussion, and I'm going to show you how I mix everything together. So stay tuned for that. And if you got some value out of this, please like and subscribe, comment down below with questions, and I'll see you next time.